So this is once again the perfect time to connect with your motivation. So again, I keep trying to remind all of us, familiarize ourselves about that motivation, because the reason is through our lives, we find ourselves out of balance. And it can be the slightest little mundane thing. It can be a major issue, a trauma. Something happens and suddenly, it's not exactly what we had on our agenda that day. And then if I come back to my motivation of what I set in the morning, that I'm really on a path to full awakening, if that's indeed, a path you're interested in. But the reason is so I can benefit all living beings. So it not only takes the focus off of me and my drama, whatever particular small or large drama I'm having, but as soon as I expand my perspective, it shifts my attitude, usually into a more positive mindset. And as soon as you have that vision, that idea of all living beings, cherishing others, it suddenly can often lift you out of restriction, conflict, sitting in the mind, depression, anxiety, fear, confusion, grasping, attachment, all of those things, which we call delusion. And all that is an imbalance in the mind. And the reasons we have those in the mind is simply because there's a previous imprint and familiarization or habit of that type of delusion in the mind. So this is a great time to just close your eyes for a moment. Just reconnect with any earlier motivation you had during the day, reestablishing a positive mindset. So please relax. Are there any particular questions from this morning or your break time exercises?
Yeah, the 9-point meditation, death meditation, where can I find that?
So that's in any of the Lam Rim books.
Any of the Lam Rim, is it palm of the hand, it's in there?
Sorry?
Liberation in the palm of the hand?
Yes, it should be in there. And any kind of Lam Rim book usually has how to think about death, and it should have the 9-point death meditation. Another thing I would recommend, you can find at the FPMT shop, extended Lam Rim outlines.
Okay.
Really easy guide.
Good.
To help you meditate on the Lam Rim. Venerable Karen developed this many years ago. She's based at Kopan Monastery in Nepal. It's really, really helpful, and I think you can download it now on the FPMT site. Extended
Karen Valholm, okay.
Lam Rim outlines. I find this really useful. It just gives you the main essential points of the different topics.
Thank you.
Sure.
Oh, by the way, the bell, what is it called? The movie? The diving bell and the butterfly?
Yes.
Excellent movie too.
It's also a movie. It's also a film.
Wonderful film.
Yeah. I didn't see the film, but I read the book, and I couldn't imagine. This is about the man with locked-in syndrome after the stroke. And one of the things he said in the book, it was, there was humor, believe it or not. He's operating, blinking one eye. So the way he wrote the book is, A is one blink, B, 2. Can you imagine? That's how he wrote the book. So what he said is different people came in to take the notes as he was dictating the book in his mind. Can you imagine? Like, what a piece of karma. You're locked into this body, but the mind is functioning, So what he said is, normally, let's say you're writing a word like many, M-A-N-Y, it fits in. And it fits into the sentence, and you know that the next word's going to be many. Like he dictates M, so he has to blink what, 23 times or whatever M is. And then he dictates A, 1, and then he goes to N. And you realize at that point that the next letter is going to be Y. Like, you can see how it fits in. You know, there are many, whatever. But he said some people would just finish it for him and say Y, and he'd, you know, great. Y is all the way at the end of the alphabet. But some people were so, you know, kind of, what's the word? Anal, maybe you could say, you know, that needed to have him, and they'd make him blink through all the way to Y to make sure it was Y. Like, it was funny when he said that the different people, and he also commented on when they would move him, they had to move him from position so he wouldn't get bed sores, and, you know, the poor disabled people that cannot move. And he just said, you know, it was so excruciatingly painful. And no one ever knew that. Like, they just tried to shift him as comfortably as possible, but he had no way to express. And the moving, and, you know, different things. It's very interesting read, the book. And it's not a very big book because, you know, he had to dictate with one eye, the poor man. So it is well worth a read when you think about your life, how much time we waste, right? And what he was doing with a massive stroke in the last year and a half of his life to try to make it worthwhile for us about what's worthwhile. So what I find with motivation, again, is shifting the perspective. And just as an example, years ago in my life, before I was a nun, I was living and working at our San Francisco center, which was a private home owned by a nun, a friend of mine. And she gave me a small room downstairs in the home, so that I would 2 weeks a month manage the center and create the program. And then 2 weeks a month, I worked at law firms in downtown San Francisco. And being teamed with one lawyer that I wasn't really happy with, this man initially. My mind said I wasn't happy with him. And we were together for about a month, me and this lawyer. And it's what happens is you have a motivation in the morning. And when I got to work and there was a certain way he was behaving, I kind of told myself, like, this isn't okay. And I don't want to do this. And I hate this work. And why am I doing this? I had a career and now I've chosen this Dharma life. And you know, your mind starts telling you stories. You have to check how accurate the stories are, right? But what I was able to do is, you have a break, you can go to the bathroom. And I would go to the bathroom. I didn't really have to go to the bathroom, but I could go into a stall and I would be really flustered and really, like, rethinking my life. Like, is this what I want to do? It was when I turned that corner to do full-time Dharma work. And so this was a way of supplementing, having a little bit of income. And, you know, it was very difficult for me in the beginning. And so I would go in and I would reset my motivation. I'd just be like, wait a minute. You know, I woke up in the morning and I was here to do my practice to become enlightened, to benefit all living beings. All living beings also includes the lawyer I'm working for. So, but what we do is we tend to, I'll say all living beings, and what we're really doing is leaving out the people we don't like from that equation. Like, I'm happy to benefit the people that I like, but the people I don't like. So this is really, the emphasis is on all. And that would really help me realize, oh yeah, he is well. And he, you know, and I could come out of the bathroom, be refreshed, renewed a bit more, have a new perspective, and was able to, fortunately, really make friends with this man, and to see that it was a story in my mind that wasn't totally accurate about him. And he was really a very nice guy. And we actually ended up having a really nice friendship for the time I worked there. And it was really positive, ended up being very positive. From me shifting my perspective, really had nothing to do with him. It was from me projecting a story onto him that was initially negative, and then rewriting the story with more accuracy and investigating what was really going on, and keeping that motivation there. So what I'd like you to do is, I'm going to read a poem from Lama Yeshe. This is a reflective meditation. I'd like you to just sit comfortably. Close your eyes, find a comfortable position, And I'm going to read some of this poem to just reflect. It's called Dissolution. Dissolution. And just find that comfortable posture for the body. And just allow your mind to settle on the breath for a moment. And let go of the other distractions. Water rushing down a steep mountainside, a natural force. There is life, but the force of dying is there, driving. Many people think I am crazy when I talk to them about death. They think I don't understand life. They say, if you think about death and suffering, you will make yourself miserable. They think I'm obsessed. Dying is horrible. Why do you dwell on it? Ridiculous. They do not understand life. We exist in a dance between life and death, a masked drama with one actor changing character, one face, then another and another, moving, changing. From the first instant of life, impermanence is with us. From the moment of conception, decay begins. In the second moment of life, a change has already occurred, and the first moment has disappeared. That is impermanence and death. I exist. I exist is a misconception, a permanent conception. Every energy is moving, changing, coming and going, coming, then growing, old, older, and dying, dying, dying. When we see a dead body, we never visualize our own corpse there. We say, oh, it's dead, it's horrible, I'm leaving now. We never think that's me. There's fear, not understanding. That terrible corpse is within you now. All sense world phenomena exist like a cloud. If there is a meeting or beginning or contact, there is naturally change, separation, and disappearance. Man and woman, friends, mother, father, family, atoms, fire and water, things. If there is a meeting, separation must follow automatically, and there will be clinging fear and suffering. Every imaginable super samsaric experience, every contact, every enjoyment will disappear. It's natural. But we are so insecure. We find a friend and worry that he will disappear. We find pleasure and worry that it will end. We are afraid to lose our home and money, our loved ones, our body. We all fear separation and disappearance. This is universal fear, but it is useless, creating only confusion. It is not a solution. It is dissolution. To choose Coca-Cola when we could have champagne is very stupid, isn't it? So please relax That's just a part of Dissolution. I just wanted to read. It's quite a nice poem from Lama Yeshe. So I'd like to talk about how we get out of this body and how we get into an in-between state, how we traverse through an in-between state and move into another life. And what I found interesting, she's such a sweetheart, this woman who, she helps me with my website times, and the one, my friend whose grandmother just passed away in Mexico City. So she's really a good practitioner, and it was so interesting how, and she hasn't been practicing that long. You know, she's probably a lot like a lot of you, and I don't know how long, but you know, but in this process, when she got the message that her grandmother was suddenly transitioning, she flew to Mexico City and was there by her bedside. And her grandmother was still a little bit conscious and hearing and smiling at her. And then she kept sending me messages on WhatsApp, what was happening. And she had all the prayers and she was asking some suggestions of what to do. And she kept saying to me, yes, she's going to be transitioning soon. And I really respected her. I was really interested to see how she was using the word transitioning. So it wasn't just about dying and death and she's dying and she, you know, and all these concepts. She was really kept saying, and then I finally got a message yesterday that she transitioned at 5 p.m., she said. That was, you know, so it was interesting how she was seeing it as this movement through finishing this life, but that she was, you know, it was a change and she was going to go on to another experience that sadly not to be with the family of this life that she knows, and they will feel the loss. There's no question like that. And yet a whole other adventure awaits. And what we'd like to do is make that adventure a positive one, as positive as possible. So what happens is what supports our body right now are various elements according to the Tibetan Buddhist tradition. Okay, so we have earth, water, fire, and air or wind. Okay, and this is also in other methodologies. These are the things that kind of support, for instance, the earth element is basically the consistency of what supports our body, the earth element. Like that is one of the things going on with the body, supporting it. And then we also have a water element in our body, as we know. We have fluids in our body. You know, when we cry, and what helps us, saliva that helps us chew and digest food, and then the things in the stomach, the fluids in the stomach that help to move the food through. When we drink, how the wastes then are eliminated. So we understand this, how much of the body is made up of water. So there's definitely a consistency of water in the body, another element. We have fire in the body because that creates the heat of the body. That keeps us warm. Okay. It also helps us digest food, the heat, things like that. And then there's an air element of our respiration that's so important to keep the lungs moving, that regulates the heart, operates the heart, which keeps the neurological activity functioning, and the neurological activity keeps the heart functioning. So it's all interconnected, these elements. And then the other thing, what I had mentioned before, the body exists on a gross level, subtle level, and most subtle level. And so the gross level is this body right here that we're aware of, that we live within, okay? Meaning that the part of the body that's tangible, we can see, we walk, we sit down, we have various things going on with the body, we dress the body. But the subtle body is a little harder for us to see, and it's not something you can cut the body open to say, oh, there's the subtle energy system. But to give you an idea, some of you may be aware of this, and some of you are involved with other methodologies, and is we have certain energy centers in the body called chakras. Chakra in Sanskrit simply means wheel, okay? And there's one located at the crown, there's one at the throat, there's one at the heart, navel, and sexual organs. And then there's small energy centers in other places throughout the body. But did you ever notice when you have tremendous fear, if you're almost in a car accident, or you have a lot of anger or something like that, or you get a bit of a shock, do you ever notice you feel it in a part of your body? You may feel a gripping in your chest, constriction of the throat, the pit in your stomach. You might get a headache. Okay, those are the subtle energy centers activating. And what happens is there's channels that run through those. We'd like to keep those wheels, those chakras, as open and serviceable as possible. But delusion prevents that. So, and what happens is there's channels that run from these chakras, and there's knots around the various channels. The more delusion you have, the more constricted the knots that keep the energy from flowing properly, like that. This is, according to Tibetan Buddhism, again, a subtle energy system that runs through your body. When you're practicing Tantra, which is a higher level practice that you can only really do with proper empowerment from a qualified Vajra guru, a teacher that is at that level, they will be, a lot of times in tantric practice, in completion stage, very high level practices, we're using the subtle body to visualize and manifest higher states of realization through using that. And the purpose of it is we have a central channel that runs through the center of our body, according to this subtle system, okay? It starts from the third eye position, middle of the forehead. It's like a translucent tube of light, the size of a drinking straw. It goes up to the crown, where it curls back down and runs right through the center of your body, slightly more towards your spine. Central channel. In Sanskrit, Uma Thurman was named after this, also named after the middle way philosophy, because her father is Robert Thurman, a great Buddhist scholar. Uma Thurman. So Uma, central channel, the middle way, basically, okay? And this channel is slightly bluish in color on the outside, but like a translucent tube of light more toward the spine. The lower end of that channel is 4 finger widths below your navel. And then there's 2 side channels that run along from the nostrils, right and left respectively. Right slightly reddish in color on the outside, the left slightly whitish, translucent tubes of light, half the diameter of the central channel. And they run up to the crown chakra, all the way down along that central channel, where their lower ends curl in to enter the lower end of the central channel. So what we're trying to do in completion stage practice is have serviceable channels, open chakras. We do practices that will purify and clear out the chakras so that everything will work well in the visualization and higher level visualizations, to bring the winds from the side channels into the central channel in the proper way. Then you will have an incredibly blissful mind state. But the main point is you can actualize absorptions, inner visualizations that will actually happen when you're dying, okay? It doesn't cause your death, but the reason you want to recognize these visions is so that you can recognize the mind in its most subtle experience, its clear light nature. Okay, and that automatically happens if you're able to bring the winds into the central channel in the proper way. And then these visualizations manifest automatically. And you want to stay as long as you can in the clear light to meditate on emptiness, the nature of reality. It's through that process that you can actualize higher states of realization. And that's what we're doing with higher level practices. So at our level, what we might want to do is understand the visualizations and what's happening in the body. These are visions that happen when you die, but they also happen when you fall asleep every night. If you have a really big yawn or sneeze, because they're kind of like mini deaths, they say. Sometimes they'll say the heart stops momentarily. And also when you have sexual orgasm. These visions actually manifest for your most subtle mind. They may manifest for a subtle mind. They may be visions that you start to recognize. Why? Because you meditate on them daily. So they come in tantric practices, and His Holiness the Dalai Lama says he does them 6 or 8 times a day because he has that many different tantric practices to do. But the point is familiarization. Familiarization. I do them several times a day in various practices I have to familiarize my mind. I try to do them slowly when I have the time. I do them more extensively in retreat so that I'll be able to recognize them when I'm dying and when I'm less encumbered with my body and the obstructions of my body, so I can recognize the clear light and meditate on emptiness in that instance, in that moment, as long as I possibly can, like that. But what happens is our minds normally are not controlled, and we're not recognizing any of the visions because we're just not familiar. Meditation technically, literally in Tibetan, doesn't mean, the word gom, meditation. It doesn't really mean meditation. It means to habituate or familiarize. So that meditation is a form of familiarizing yourself with your true nature, virtue. Okay, that's why we meditate, to really have our mind in a much more virtuous place automatically. And so I know it takes effort. I know it's hard to concentrate. Okay, it's about practice. The more we practice, the better we get at it. So it is a process. Please be patient with yourself in the process. What happens is a lot of students show up, they get excited, they've heard their friends meditating, they've heard it reduces stress, it's all good, okay? And they try for 2 months, and then they'll say, I'm still angry. I've been doing this for 2 months, but they're 40 years old, so you have 40 years of doing it one way. How is it possible you think you're gonna undo that in 2 months? So let's be realistic with our practice, right? This is a process, okay? And slowly you build. And if you're taking baby steps, and we're here, you make enough baby steps, and the next thing you know, you're over here. So that's significant, that space. But what we want is we want to see something. We want to have something. In Americans especially, we want it instantly. We wanted our enlightenment 2 weeks ago wrapped up in a nice little silver box. And okay, that's not this path. If you want that, please find another path. And with my blessing, right? That's not this path, but this path is so rewarding. But we know how to make effort. We make effort in many things. So this is not new to us, making effort. We just don't make effort in the best directions necessarily. Okay, so let's talk about what happens. And I shared and I'm going to share my screen right now. Oh, so let me explain a little bit more about the body and the subtle body. And so that's a subtle energy system I'm just describing in a very brief way. And then there's winds that operate that system, okay? And if you want to go back to the most subtle body, it's a most subtle wind that really is what our bodies come from, most subtle wind. And I mentioned yesterday in the Hindu system, they might call it prana. Chinese system, they might call it qi. It's a life force, physical in basis, okay? In Tibetan, they call it lung, wind energy, okay? That most subtle wind is what allows the fertilization to take place. Sperm and egg are physical. Physical things create other physical things, and that creates your body. And we have proof of that. You can look under a microscope. You can see the fertilization process take place. You see the cells start to replicate. If it's human, well, they turn into this. Eventually, it'll turn into a human being, okay? The mind is there all along, separate from the body. It is not the body. It's not the brain. Consciousness is separate, but has a unique way of riding along with that life force of the subtle wind, most subtle mind mounted on most subtle wind, the seeds in that consciousness dictating, again, how that life is going to be, how those cells are going to form, what interests you'll have, what hurdles, what obstacles, what joys, all of that is dictated by the mind. And as Tibetan Buddhism says, everything comes from the mind. Everything comes from the mind. We don't have a God, the creator. Your mind doesn't come from your parents. Your genetic material does. Physical nature. You will have mannerisms like your parents, absolutely. Right? Influences they've had on you. And some of it is really interesting. But one thing I would have you look at, and those seeds are dictated, those seeds, karmic imprints, we call them, is what dictates, and we're making karma all the time. We're creating imprints, Tibetan Buddhism says, all the time, with our body, speech, and mind. But I wasn't sure about reincarnation. I must have had some imprint about karma. I kind of got this cause and result relationship in a sense when I was younger. Must have been some imprint. But what I found interesting, and looking at the mind, thinking about the mind when I was getting into Tibetan Buddhism, let's think about this. How many of you have siblings, a sister or a brother? Just put your hands up. Okay. So Heather, are you similar to your siblings?
In some ways, but in many important ways, not at all.
Not at all? Okay. Yeah. And Daniel and partner, are you, who do you have? You have siblings?
I'm Wanda.
Wanda, thank you, Wanda.
It's okay. I have one sibling.
Are you like them or not like them?
Not so much. Some things yes, some things no.
Okay. Who else has siblings? Steve, are you like your siblings?
Sorry about that. I think my brother and I couldn't be more disparate and different. Just absolutely hard to believe that we grew up in the same house and that we are brother and brothers. I'm a little more like my sister, but nothing like my brother.
Same parents?
Yes.
Yeah, same parents. I have two siblings. We have some similarities, but we are completely different people, all three of us. My sister has two boys, 1.5 years apart. They're tall and thin and they kind of resemble each other. They are like night and day. Okay, so what's interesting is this, when I studied this, did you ever look at puppies in a litter? Have you ever been around a litter of puppies or kittens? And there could be 9 of them, right? There could be 4, 5, 9. Did you ever watch them for a little while? They're completely different. You know, you have the one that comes out that's real feisty, that's biting everything. You have the one that's like mewing in the corner, kind of whining. You have the one that's always eating. And you have the one that's always sleeping, kind of scared in the corner. Okay. The mind is there. Distinct minds are there. It's not from the parents. It's not, they're completely unique. Your own set of karma comes in there. And that's when I really watched stuff where I really looked at it and investigated. Again, I investigated and went, and different predispositions you come in with, right? So my sister's kids, they're grown now, but when they were little, the younger one, age 1, I think he was 1 years old in the apartment. One time we couldn't find him in the apartment. We're looking for him. No, he's off in a corner with a big book across his lap, turning the pages. He couldn't read, but he was so attracted to books. We'd often see him crawling off to the bookshelf, pulling books off the thing. Look, he couldn't read, but some attraction to books. And he's a huge reader now. Huge reader, like that. So you just see these interests, you know, of what they're interested in right from a young age, of where they, you know, my other niece and nephew at a young age, I noticed, one of them was very comfortable killing insects. Like they were outside and ants were crawling and they were just smashing them. No problem. We got to kill it. And the other one was going, no, 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 no. Where does it come from? Their parents weren't like that. Their parents weren't saying kill the ants or don't kill the ants. So you start investigating and you think there's a mind in there. There's a consciousness that seems to have its own set of rules. And those rules are based on those karmic imprints you're making. So we want to make good imprints. So the next thing I wanted to mention is this subtle mind mounted on the subtle wind, okay? And the subtle wind, what happens as the fetus develops. So we know the cells replicate, okay? And you first have this life force, this initial subtle wind lung that's allowing that process to happen. But as the fetus starts developing, as you know, the head bud starts thing and the brain happens. There's a little heart beating, and then the arms start budding out, the limbs start to come out, and then there's more development. And what happens is subtle winds start developing from the most subtle wind. Subtle winds, okay? So what happens is in Tibetan system, there's upward moving winds that are subtle winds. Upward moving winds, and these are winds that I'm not really cognizant of, but they allow me to speak. They allow me to chew food and swallow. They allow me to cry, turn my head, grow hair, like that. All because Tibetan system says upward moving winds, upward moving subtle winds. We also have in the body downward voiding subtle winds. They allow us to walk, sit down, go to the bathroom, have sexual orgasm, downward voiding subtle winds. And then there's a whole lot of subtle winds, they branch out. Okay. So what happens, as you know, with natural aging, the subtle winds start degenerating. It's a natural process. So as you get a little older, your hair starts to change color, gray to white, simply because upward moving subtle winds are degenerating. Your eyesight changes because upward moving subtle winds are degenerating. Your knees or your hips hurt. Downward voiding subtle winds are dissolving and degenerating. And it's a natural process that's going on. It's not one that we're every day aware of, but you may notice, you know, as time goes on, and you see how old people, along with gravity, start walking more hunched over. The body starts shrinking, and parts of the body hurt, and they're much more focused on walking more carefully because those subtle winds aren't as supple to support you running and jumping off of rocks and things like that. Okay, so it's just a natural process as we get comfortable with the natural process of degeneration. But because there's degeneration, there is regeneration as well. It continues on and on and on countless times. In the Tibetan system, there's no beginning or end to your mind or consciousness. No beginning or end, okay? The consciousness continues to go on, and the reason is each moment of consciousness or mind is creating a result, is causing an effect, and that effect is the cause of another effect, and that effect is the cause of another effect, another effect, another effect. There's no end, there's no final effect, because that final one is a cause of another moment, like that. So it's something to think about with reincarnation, and there are meditations on the continuity of consciousness that you can do that help to bring you back into lives, to think of, you know, there could have been a life before this, and what predispositions you have and memories, and slowly you can look at things like that. So then the subtle winds start forming as you're forming as a fetus. And then eventually you're about 9 months in there, inside your mother, almost fully developed as a baby, as an infant, and then you're born, either cesarean section or naturally, whatever, and you come out, okay? But all these subtle winds have been operating based on the most subtle wind and that development. The mind is there, dictating you come out, and finally remove from that sac and things like that, is then you take your first real breath of air, okay? And the baby often cries. And they want the baby to cry to clear the lungs and to make sure that they are breathing on their own. And then you have gross wind. This is gross wind. You can see my chest rise, you hear it. Gross wind is basic respiration, okay? As we start actively dying, the end of our life, let's say a slow death of old age or disease, again, the respiration starts to get more and more shallow. Some of you have taken care of people until they died. You've seen this process. And eventually what will happen is the exhalations are longer and slower, the inhalation shallower and shallower, until eventually, And you can actually count them sometimes with people where you're not sure if it's the last exhalation, and there can be 45 seconds or more before they take another intake. And the intake can be very shallow, and then there'll be a very long, sometimes raspy exhalation, and then eventually it'll be the last one, and there will be no more inhalation. And then you're continuing the transition, okay? So we then would say someone is clinically dead when there's no more inhalation, the heart has stopped. Tibetan Buddhism said there's a whole world of activity still going on. So here's what happens. And I'm going to share this document that's part of the materials that, that we had given you. Okay, here we go. Okay, can you see that, the 8 stages of dying? I'm going to make it bigger. Okay, great. Oh, I guess I can't make, let me see if I can make this bigger. There we go. Okay. According to Tibetan Buddhism, this is what's happening. You can also read about this in a book called, sometimes titled, The Tibetan Book of the Dead. But I think a more accurate title is, you know, it's interesting why everyone calls when I'm teaching. Okay. The other time, no, but only when I'm teaching. Okay. So the 8 stages of dying are, the Tibetan Book of the Dead is, I think, more accurately titled, it's the Bardo Theodol. I'm not pronouncing it great, but Bardo means in between. It's a Sanskrit term for in between. You're in between 2 lives. It's a transition, okay? And so it really, on one level, and I know Robert Thurman used to say this, is it's really called, should be called the Tibetan Book of the In-Between. And he has a translation of it that he did that's very good. So again, the Bardo and what these stages of dying are, they're listed in the Tibetan Book of the Dead, and you can read exactly what will happen at each stage in a person who's dying slowly from old age or a disease. The same visions will happen in a sudden death, car accident, major stroke, heart attack. The same things will happen, but they happen very, very quickly. So it's very hard to catch them, especially if you're not a practitioner. But the reason practitioners are visualizing these, especially higher level practitioners in tantric practice several times a day, slowly, again, so we can familiarize our mind with these visions that are happening every day anyway, so that I can recognize the clear light and meditate effectively there. This is what happens when you're dying, okay? And here it talks about as the nervous system closes down, okay, from the periphery to deep within the nervous system, okay? And so there is still activity after that last exhalation, according to Tibetan Buddhism, okay? The first thing that happens, there's a loss of physical power. And this is where the earth element is dissolving. The earth element is dissolving. Your limbs become thin and weak. Vision can be blurred, it may be difficult to move the eyes. You may feel like you're being buried under a large amount of earth. Okay, and this is a time when people may still be conscious and they can't move anymore. And you'll see that they're there, and you'll see, and you know, Tibetan Book of Dead describes the eyes are sunken in, the gums withdraw, the teeth become more prominent, the tongue gets kind of blue-black, more in the back of the throat. Very common natural things of somebody dying. Again, we're dissolving in. So if your mind is familiar and your practices are good and rich, that's where you're going, that's where you're headed, is to do these meditations and to have people around you are reminding you about these visions or the practices. And I'll talk tomorrow about, if you'd like, you can record your practices and have them as part of your own death kit, like that, as far as we have health directives, but this can be your own kind of Dharma death preparation thing that you can create. So there's an internal vision at this point when the earth element dissolves, okay? And it's basically, here it's described as a silvery blue mirage-like image. So if you look out on a hot road, on a hot asphalt into the distance, and you see those waves of a mirage, it could be like water around you, this silvery blue image of water around you, and that's your whole experience. It's not separate from you. It is your mind when this is happening. So again, if you're familiar with the vision, you'll recognize the vision. You want to recognize the vision so you don't miss the clear light, which is at the very end of this and the more subtle visions. This is still the gross dissolution, okay? The next thing you have is, and what you have where it says physical power, you'll see loss of feeling, loss of discrimination, loss of volition, loss of consciousness. Those are considered what basically makes up the body and mind, what's called the 5 aggregates. 5 aggregates. Aggregate is collection. So what's our body and mind made up of according to the Tibetan Buddhist system? Our body. That's number 1, loss of physical power. That's our form. That's our form, okay? But the second one, feelings. If you see number 3, discrimination. Number 4, volition. Number 5, consciousness. Those are the aggregates of the mind, those 4, feeling, discrimination, volition, consciousness. Feelings are not emotion. In Tibetan Buddhism, it's simply pain, pleasure, or neutral. Okay, so in the second one, after this mirage-like image where the earth element's dissolving, it dissolves into water. And with number 2, the water element starts dissolving in the body. Okay, so this is where feeling will dissolve. And here it says strong physical and mental feelings of pleasure, displeasure, neutral will cease. The mouth becomes dry. Everything dries up. So the sweating ceases, your hearing weakens, but mainly the fluids in the body are drying up. Okay. The inner vision that you will have that's associated with this is a smoke-filled room. Grayish blue smoke-filled room, that's your entire experience, not separate from the mind. We're going to do these meditations in a little bit. The third dissolution, as the water dissolves into fire, the fire element dissolves. Okay? And this is where the discrimination aspect of the mind starts dissolving. You don't recognize faces, you don't remember names. If you're still conscious, you won't remember the names of friends or relatives. Hands and feet become cold because all the heat is dissolving into the center, into the heart center. And it's the heart center, not the heart, the organ, the subtle energy system there, the chakra in the heart, okay, that's separate from the heart, the organ, is where the mind and most subtle mind and most subtle wind actually absorb to. So instead of the mind being here in the brain, as we think of it in Tibetan system, it's heart center, like that, in the center of that heart chakra. Digestion will cease at this point. Inhalation becomes extremely weak and the exhalation longer. So you may still be what we consider alive. Sense of smell ceases, and the inner vision associated with this is a spark-like vision, like fireflies in the night sky. And that's your whole experience. The next thing dissolving from the mind is volition. And you can no longer move the limbs. The air element is dissolving. No sense of purpose or identity about your work and things like that. The other senses are finishing. This is where the last exhalation will happen and the breathing stops. The inner vision is like a dim glow. Here it says at the bottom of a dark well. I've also heard it described as the glow around a candle or butter lamp that's about to go out. And that's your whole vision. That's your whole experience, not separate from your mind. Then you have a loss of consciousness. Okay, and that's all the gross level of the dissolutions that happen. The breathing has stopped, but the death process internally is still going on according to Tibetan system. Okay, here it says it can still be reversed. And this could be where people come back, you know, are resuscitated like that. I can't really say for sure, but the last thoughts are going of this life. Consciousness becomes more and more subtle over these final subtle visions right now. So the first thing that arises is what's called a white appearance. And this is where the reason there's a white appearance is you've got white, and this is more on a tantric level, so I can't go into all the details of it, but you've got white coming down from the crown chakra, and that creates a white vision in the subtle consciousness. And what it's like is a harvest moon, a full moon over an empty field. This is not the clear light. It's like a milky looking aura of a full moon over like a newly harvested field. And that's your entire vision. That's your, not separate from your mind, that manifests to the subtle consciousness. Again, you try to keep your mind on that while a part of your mind is thinking, I don't want to miss the clear light. I recognize this vision of the white appearance. I don't want to miss the clear light. The next thing that manifests with subtle consciousness dissolving is a red, let's see, there's red increase. Here it says red vision, but it's red increase. And this has been described to me by Lama Zopa Rinpoche as a brilliant, he showed me once in India, we were sitting at sunset time. There was one of these most brilliant orange, magenta, pink sunsets streaking along the whole sky. And he said, it's like this. So it was really sweet of him, of Rinpoche, to say that, because I often think of that time when I think about this vision, the red increase. So this is because from the lower chakras, red is coming up to the heart center. So I have white coming down, red coming up. So because the red is increasing, I'm having a red vision for my subtle consciousness. Okay, we're not used to how the subtle mind and the subtle wind operate, but they're really running our whole show like that. Then what happens, the next thing of subtle consciousness, there's what's called a black near attainment. Black near attainment. It's like a dead faint. The reason it's called near attainment is we're nearly at the clear light. Total darkness, black as black can be, like that. And you can have a momentary loss of consciousness if you're doing it properly. You're not aiming for that if you don't have control over the mind, but sometimes people pass out like that, okay? And then the clear light dawns. If it's a dying process, the clear light of death will dawn. But the thing is, you can manifest these visions in ordinary life through higher level practices. You're not creating your death, but you're just familiarizing your mind and able to actualize the clear light in your life, which is very powerful state of mind, state of being, where you can meditate on advanced practices, especially emptiness. And this describes the most subtle consciousness, like the clear sky at dawn, the final vision of death. It was recently also described to me as, because it's hard to know what is the clear light? What is that really like, that most subtle consciousness? And it's not, it's like luminescence, but it was almost like brilliant black, is somebody described it, like translucent black. So we don't think of black as color, or we don't think of, I mean, black is a color, but not black as a clear light, but it's that kind of magnificent, brilliant sense like that, but it's more of a clear light, luminescence as well, and really beautiful image of that. And so that's all. And again, great meditators, they can stay in that clear light. I think it's been known for some people to stay in it for a few weeks without the body decaying, as long as they're in that meditation, because the consciousness is still in the body. And usually the body does not decay as long as the consciousness is there. Okay. So what will happen is, if you can maintain meditation there, okay, people will not move your body. They say don't touch the body. The only thing you might do is to stimulate the crown. And there's some substances you can put on the crown or pull hairs on the top of the crown to stimulate the consciousness up, because if it leaves through a lower opening, it could indicate a lower rebirth. And it has specific things in the death time if the consciousness leaves through the eye, and if it leaves through the nose or the mouth or the sexual organ, things like that, of what could indicate the next rebirth. So we try to stimulate more for it to attract up. But you try to stay in that clear light of death, focused on that, meditating on emptiness as long as possible. Okay, and eventually it will cease, the concentration ceases, the consciousness will leave. And what happens is those red and white substances meet at the heart, inside an indestructible drop in the center of the heart chakra, this subtle energy system, not the heart, the organ. Okay, and inside there is the most subtle wind. Everything comes back to that, which is always residing there anyway, with the most subtle mind or consciousness mounted on it. Okay, eventually when everything, all those subtle winds, most subtle winds dissolve into that space in the center of the heart chakra, the indestructible drop opens. Okay, consciousness leaves that form, leaves that body. Then the decay of that body begins. Okay, and where does the consciousness go? To an in-between state, a bardo. It's a transition between two lives. According to the Tibetan Buddhist system, the bardo can last for up to 49 days. And let me just see if, okay, so as far as finishing these visions, okay, here we go. Bardo, like in a dream. Okay, the let me see what. Okay, 49 days. I'll explain that. So what happens is these visions happen every night when you fall asleep. Normally, our consciousness is too gross to catch these visions, or we haven't practiced enough, like that. So we miss them. That when you wake up, the visions happen in reverse. So basically, I come into consciousness from the clear light, right? There is a black vision, there's a red increase, there's a white appearance, and then the more grosser levels of consciousness come in as my mind starts functioning on that grosser level. And then finally, consciousness, I wake up and I'm back here in my body and ready to go again. So there's this constant kind of mini death, we go to sleep, and the waking up and the rebirth, waking up, and it's just a mirror of what happens a little bit more dramatically when we're making the bigger transition of death into the bardo. Okay, here in the intermediate state, the bardo. What happens in the bardo is we take a bardo being's body. And what that means is it does have a body, but it's more subtle than this kind of body. A bardo being's body, being more subtle, can traverse through walls and things like that. Again, here it says formed from the wind energy that accompanies the mind. It's a projection of the same karmic potential that causes the next birth. And what all you're doing in this bardo is you are uncontrollably catapulted through looking for the next rebirth based on the karmic imprints in your mind, like that. This process can last up to 49 days depending on your karma. If you are a sadistic killer, you may traverse a very short time in the bardo and immediately go to a suffering hell, like that. If you are an incredibly wonderful being and have incredibly good karma and great imprints, you may be in the bardo a very short time and quickly take a great rebirth, like that, or end up in what they call pure realms or pure lands, which are not really heavens or God realms, but they're places that you have every perfect condition to practice Dharma, and you quickly get enlightened from those pure realms, like that. And you can be a human in the pure realm, but taking a rebirth there instead of, for instance, planet Earth with its wars and its suffering and its poverty and all its challenges, and people feeling that they need to work all the time to support themselves, so they have little time to practice Dharma. And that's our kind of everyday existence, like that. So here it says, whatever place a bardo being thinks about, the body automatically is there. That's the subtle nature of the bardo body. You may experience terrifying visions. but basically catapulted just looking what's dictated as far as what imprints I have to take the next rebirth. Looking for that next rebirth, which will absolutely happen at 49 days if it hasn't happened before. Every 7 days in the Bardo, you will experience a mini transition or a mini death, not as dramatic as getting out of this form, but again, another transition up to 7 weeks until you finally connect with whatever rebirth is there at 49 days. And then you'll, if it's a human, you could come back as an animal, but you will then be born into a womb, and the mind, the subtle mind, will come back in there, again, connected to your own subtle wind, most subtle wind that's still in existence in the Bardo being's body. Still there, and then they will manifest. Now, how does that actually happen? I've asked that question many times. I don't know. I haven't gotten an answer of how does it actually end up there. Like, how does the imprint of karma happen? I've asked that. It just happens, is what I've been told. Okay. And then what happens is when you're developing an embryo, the visions will be reversed as you start the development all over again, and on we go again. Okay, I'm just gonna close this off. But that is part of the materials if you want to access that again. And there's the link. Thank you, Heather. She's put the link to the materials in the chat. So thank you very much. Wonderful. Okay. So what we want to do is very much take care of what imprints we are making with our body, speech, and mind. And what I want to bring in here couple things from Lama Zopa Rinpoche. And also from Facing Death and Finding Hope. I want to bring in Christine Longacre. In her book that's on the list, Facing Death and Finding Hope. This is an older book, but it's totally relevant. I really like it. She has the 4 tasks of living and dying. 4 tasks of living and dying. We've been talking about some of these. I find them really helpful. And so this is a way now we can practically start wisely living to make sure that death is going to be peaceful, that I can use the death time because we're unencumbered by the body. So great meditators are ready, right? And they're not fearing death. They're actually, in a sense, looking forward to it, not causing their death prematurely, but they want to use that opportunity because you're less encumbered by the body. You've let go of everything. Everything's finished. All your business of this life is finished in a good way. Think if it's really finished in a good way. You're done. And all I need to do now is focus on those subtle visions and meditate on emptiness. Okay. So now I'm going to need to meditate on emptiness in life before I get there so that I'm familiar with it and I know what I'm doing. But it's a great opportunity to gain higher realizations. So that's why people that are highly realized, great meditators, they have less fear at the death time. We have fear because of all the things we didn't get to and the laziness and the regrets and the confusion. But think if you can really work with your mind now because you have every perfect opportunity to maximize that time and make sure that you maybe can even choose your rebirth. Choose a great rebirth. That's where we'd like to get to. That's going to get us closer to enlightenment quickly. Then we're free and then we're happy all the time and blissful. Okay? And one thing I wanted to mention is we, as far as those winds entering the central channel, talk about, this is higher level practices though, but what happens in sexual orgasm is it feels incredibly blissful, right? You know, I mean, I haven't always been a nun, okay? So it feels incredibly blissful, right? And the reason is The winds get close to entering the central channel during sexual orgasm, okay? But they don't enter the right way. Imagine if you get the winds in the right way. Because I've heard about the lamas talking about the bliss, and it's supposed to be the most extraordinary. Now, we're not doing it just to experience the bliss. Our motivation is to benefit all living beings. But imagine that as a byproduct. And sometimes when I was first into the Dharma and I heard the lamas meeting and laughing together, and it was this childlike, innocent, blissful laughter that I think really comes from that state of mind. The mind can always be happy like that. So why not go for that? Why not try to make that happen? We have every ability right now to do it like that. Does it take effort? Of course it does. I know it does. But what better way to make effort? Something to think about. So Christine Longacre, 4 Tasks of Living and Dying. Number 1, understanding and transforming suffering. Understanding and transforming suffering, okay? We've been talking a bit about this. It involves coming to accept that suffering and problems are a natural, inevitable part of life, okay? This is samsara. And samsara is a Sanskrit word that means to turn or to cycle, okay? So through birth, old age, sickness, and death, all of that is suffering. All of that is suffering. I'm not going to say there isn't any miracle of birth, and I've seen some really good deaths as well, but it's all suffering. You know, you know that. So can I look at that rather than being upset when the car doesn't start? That's samsara. Samsara's nature. It doesn't mean I don't practically engage and work on things and try to fix the computer and fix this and things like that. But understanding, instead of getting angry and agitated at people, just realizing people are struggling. This is samsara's nature. It's not perfect. There's war on the planet. There's people starving. There's people confused. There's people hostile to other people. That's samsara, samsara's nature, okay? So we understand this, okay? But let's learn then for ways to better cope. As I mentioned, learning to cope with smaller problems that occur as we go through life, okay? That helps us cope with the bigger problems that we're gonna encounter, especially when we're dying. So again, this is practice. Let me practice with the small problems that show up. Can I have a spacious, calm mind? And then when the bigger problems show up, how's my mind? Is it balanced? Have I understood? You know, I have to say I was so impressed with this friend of mine losing her grandmother, and she's pretty balanced. She knows at 94, you know, it's a long time to live. She's going to miss her grandmother. She's sad. Absolutely. She's there acknowledging, being present with the transition and trying. She tried so hard to make it as comfortable for her grandmother as possible. That's what we do. That's the best we can do, like that. Number 2, task of living and dying. Making a connection, healing relationships, letting go. Very powerful, these 3. Making a connection, healing relationships, and letting go. So this means right now, are you communicating openly, compassionately, and clearly? Some people are not skillful communicators, you know, and it's constantly a problem in certain families that I know. Constant mess of communication. You know, when I was at Vajrapani, our center in California, we spent 4 years working on communication with a Buddhist therapist. It was some of the most transformative work some of us said we did, you know, with Dharma. But we realized we didn't communicate very well, very unskillful. So this was a way of, you know, learning how to better communicate. And a lot of those lessons have stayed with me in communication, you know. So it's very helpful like that. Especially family and friends. We owe this to family and friends in a way, to communicate skillfully. Now, I know they don't always communicate skillfully and reasonably and compassionately. It doesn't mean we have to get toppled by that, but we can keep showing up with our skill, our compassion, our love, like that. Can you clear up any unresolved problems, especially with family? You know, I've been with people dying, and I can tell in the end where there's some disturbance, and when they're still able to talk. One friend I was with, and I could see there was some agitation, her relationship with her mother. And finally we're like, is there anyone else you want to talk with? You know, and then what happened is we arranged a call with her mother. She could hardly speak at that point. So why wait for that? Why not do it when you're healthy, when you're well, when you're able to really sit down with each other if it's possible, or on the phone, or now we have our video calls, to try to clear that up as best as you can. Sometimes the person doesn't want to, the other person. And I've met people where, you know, they're like, I haven't talked to my brother in 5 years. And then you say, well, and there's like, there was some disagreement, they'll say, right? And how many times they don't remember what the disagreement was about, right? So why are you still holding on to it? Like, is it possible to just call them and kind of say, whatever happened, I'm really sorry for my part in it? And now the person may say, I don't want to talk, but at least you tried from your side. And I know some people that initiated the call when they were dying, and they felt satisfied, at least that they said, well, at least I tried. I wish I'd done it earlier, but at least I did it before I died. They don't want to talk, that's okay. I'm letting it go, like that. Powerful place. Better to do it now. Fix it now while you can, while you're well enough. Okay. And then what you can't fix, and maybe the other person's died. I've done some work in a meditation with people that have passed away that I felt like there was something that needed to be cleared. I just visualized them across from me, had a conversation with them, just said what I needed to say, asked for forgiveness, forgiven them, whatever. And you might need to do it over and over again. It's okay. And at some point you feel good enough, and I can let it go, and it doesn't come up again. So you can try like that. Very helpful. So the things that you cannot resolve, can you realize you've made every effort? And now I can let it go. That's okay. It's as good as it gets with samsara. At least I've tried, given it my best shot. Nothing's perfect in samsara. So you're maybe not going to finish all the loose ends in the best way. And that's okay. That's how samsara is. We do our best. So the cleaner we get now with the activities, the easier it's going to be later for us. And the better imprints each life as well. Like that. There's a couple people I know, and I know we all know these people. We have them in our lives. Some of them might be us, right? It's a couple of people close to me, a mother and a son, excuse me. They're doing a really unique dance together in this life. They are a mirror for one another in many ways. They don't want to acknowledge it. I think they see it, but the things that they're mirroring to each other are the things they don't like in themselves. So there's a lot of issues. And if there's some way they could just acknowledge that and sit down and kind of be a resource for each other, but it's always easier to see it from the outside, right? Than when it's you or when you're in it. But there is a lot of that I've noticed, of people that, you know, there was somebody else in my family that I think the mother died leaving the daughter, and they were both older, and one of our family members said they're going to have to come back and do that one again. They didn't quite, you know, get it right this time. Again, you do the best you can, but the cleaner you get with the relationships, the better it's going to be. Number 3, tasks of living and dying, cultivating a spiritual practice. We've been talking about this. We'll talk more about this tomorrow too. Cultivating a spiritual practice. I think you understand a bit of what that's about. Number 4, this is essential. Finding meaning in life. Finding meaning in life. Okay, not having a clear idea as to what's the purpose and meaning of your life can cause a lot of misery and a lot of confusion. Especially as you get older, there's a lot of regrets. Okay, so don't wait any longer if you're not sure what lends meaning to your life. It should be a priority right now. And what I mean about the best meaning in some regards is where you feel a deep inner contentment. There's certain activities you're engaged in where you feel that you're in sync. This is really when I'm happiest of what I really feel like I'm doing. In a sense, I would recommend the kind of giving back in a good way to the planet and to beings like that. It's not just about a hedonistic, like I love the beach trip, that was just great. I think it's got to be a little bit more expansive than that. So that's what I'm talking about, great meaning, is find that out now, what feeds your soul in a sense. What feeds your psyche, and just keep going towards it. And don't worry about the money and all those other things. I mean, I have to say, my life, I was involved in politics, wanting to make a positive change in the world, wanting to help. I worked for good people. Yes, there used to be some good people in politics, but really, you know, and then working for a political magazine and just feeling, volunteering, trying to find a way, and obviously was trained by my family to build a career, to make money, to support myself. That was kind of what you're supposed to do. Okay. I met the Dharma, left the career at one point, turned to live and work at Dharma centers where I had no money. It was quite stressful at one point, but everything's always been provided somehow. I live simply. I don't have a lot of money, but I feel like if I stay on this path of helping people, and I'm very happy doing it, and somehow everything I've really needed has been provided. Like, so why certainly at this point in my life, would I question and worry, is it going to happen? Is somebody going to take care of me? I just feel like if I got here, you know, it should be okay like that. And the worst case scenario, one of my friends asked me once, do you have a retirement account? This was some years ago. Do you have a retirement account? Your retirement account is the Dharma. It's your Dharma practice. I more and more believe it. It's your refuge. Seriously, because I said, people I know that have their retirements, they never have enough. They're always worried about it. There's always complications and this and the taking the withdrawals, and I had to pay taxes on that. And there's always some complication. Some people have a fair amount of money. They're living retired, living the good life. Great. That works out. And it's amazing how you didn't realize you may be running out as you get older. People are living longer. You don't think you're going to live to be 85 or 90. People do now. Do you have enough for like, and some retirement people I know, friends of mine that met with people, the first question they ask is, so how long do you want it to last, the money? You don't know when you're going to die, right? Some people say 90 and they live to be 95. They out of money the last 5 years. Like that. That was certainly the situation with my dad. Last few years, really running out of money, you know, like that became a bit stressful. So you just don't know. But if the mind, I think, is taken care of, I do believe the universe provides in some ways. And I said to this friend, I said, so the worst case scenario would be, I could be in a nursing home sharing a room with somebody with a blasting TV. That might be a little stringent for me, a little hard for me. Worst case scenario. Or let's say you end up in the gutter dying alone. That's really worst case scenario. Is that going to happen to me? And I said to her, but if it does happen, how long do you think I'm going to last out there? 3 weeks? I'll take the 3 weeks like that versus the rest of my life being a slave for my retirement, right? Because I got to live the way I wanted to live, helping people, doing what I really love doing, following the advice of my guru. I really think it's the best thing to do like that. And you'll always, and nobody ever starved on the Buddha's watch. I think there's holy beings really taking care. So I really trust that. I take refuge in that, like that. But so please find meaning in life and then just go in that direction, which is what I did. And I've never really looked back, just been providing and people to serve. And I always have something to do and something I enjoy. And I'm really fortunate. So do find meaning, don't wait. And then I want to mention, and then we're going to do a meditation. This is a little more traditional from Lama Zopa Rinpoche, the 5 powers. How to live your life with the 5 powers. So Christine Longacre, a wonderful practical guide for Westerners like that. But this is combining an entire life's practice into the 5 powers. People say, well, how do I get ready? How do I live my life? Okay. Number 1, the power of motivation. I've talked about that. The power of motivation. Okay. What's your motivation? What motivates your actions during the day? What is Dharma? And I would say, what makes you a Buddhist? I've asked this question before, so if you know the answer to this, just refrain for a moment. What would you say, any of you? What distinguishes somebody from being a Buddhist as opposed to someone else? Oh, there's a nice picture of Heather. It looks like in front of Institute Vajrayogini with the beautiful stupa there and the beautiful chateau. It's our center outside Toulouse, one of my favorite centers. Beautiful picture. What distinguishes you to be a Buddhist, would you say? Anybody? What makes you a Buddhist? Barbara.
I understand it as following or taking refuge in the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha.
Yep, most people say taking refuge. That's certainly part of it. Absolutely. And there's a refuge ceremony that you can do. And sometimes you get a name and looking at the qualities of the Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, and you'd follow some precepts like that. What else makes you a Buddhist? Thank you. Any other ideas of what you think a Buddhist is? What would distinguish them from other paths? Mary Jo.
Well, you know, I have taken refuge in the Buddha, but I prefer to say I'm studying Buddhism.
Studying Buddhism. Great.
It's just my thing. Yeah.
Yes, wonderful. Anything distinct about your studying Buddhism that you specifically like to do in your Buddhist path?
But what I would like to say is it's changed my life entirely in so many good ways. And but I like to kind of have a door open. I like to try things. I like to see how they work for me.
Okay.
And I've been trying Buddhism for some period of time, different styles, and I like it. It works for me.
Great. Thank you. Wonderful. Kim.
Yeah, for me, Venerable Amy, I would think being a Buddhist would be to acknowledge that there is no creator, there is no punisher, and that it is me that is responsible for my own life.
Yes, thank you. So these are all very connected, absolutely. And what we'd often say, taking from these 3 situations, thank you, is you're an inner being. You're an inner being. So what you've all kind of said and what Mary Jo was saying is she's tried on these teachings and she sees that it works for her. And what Kim was saying is, you know, realizing that it's I'm in the controls, it's me and my mind. Okay. So with Buddhism, you're always checking your mind. What's my responsibility? I'm not happy right now. What's going on in my mind? What the rest of the world is doing is, I'm not happy now. It's this jerk in front of me that's causing my pain. It's that car over there on the road. It's this lousy food. It's this uncle so-and-so that drives me crazy. Everything external. The finger always pointed out. In Buddhism, whatever's showing up, I'm extremely happy. What's going on with my mind? Why am I so happy now? What's the situation around me? I'm really miserable. What is the situation going on? What's my mind? What's happened with my mind? You're an inner being. You're taking it into your mind, investigating. I think that's what's really quite distinct also about Buddhism, let alone not having a God, the creator, that's doing it to you, things like that. Everything comes from the mind, okay? So motivation again, power number 1, okay? How do we know what our motivation is? How do we change our motivation? So that power of motivation, as I mentioned to you, is this first power of creating this life practice is keep that motivation going, please. Revisit it through the day. It will rebalance your mind into a happier place. It broadens your perspective. So essential. It's one of the bookends around the day. The other bookend is dedication. Before any activity and after any activity. It can even be going to the bathroom, can become a virtuous act based on your motivation and your dedication, like that. Number 2, power of the 5 powers. The power of the positive seed. The power of the positive seed. So exploring what is merit? What is virtue? You know, most of us know what that is. What's dedication? Okay. You know, why do we dedicate the merit? You know, it's like having a little drop of water. I created something positive and I have this little drop of water, but if I leave it on its own, the chances of it evaporating are great. When I dedicate it, I'm putting it in the ocean, sealing it in with all this vast body of water so I never lose it. If I leave the merit undedicated and I get angry, I destroy the merit. It's very easy to destroy a lot of merit. So I want to keep creating. I want to explore virtue when my mind's happier. What positive activities am I doing? Can I change up this very negative mind state that I'm having right now into something more positive? Like that. So that's all related to that of dedication, creating positive mind states, transforming negative mind states. Number 3, we have the power of familiarity. The power of familiarity. Practice makes perfect. We've heard it a million times. Many things we do well are because we do them over and over and over. What about working on your mind? What about meditation? Are you doing it over and over and over? Okay. Familiarity comes with practice, and practice, I know, requires effort. Effort requires enthusiasm. It requires aspiration and energy. Okay. So how can we keep our practice full of energy? That's a good question. How do we keep our practice full of energy? Part of it is I like associating with a center. You have like-minded people. You can serve the center, like what Heather's doing and Anil, right? And you serve these centers, and now we do it on Zoom, so you can live anywhere. You can do it from the comfort of your living room. And maybe it's just a few hours a month, but it's a great way to give back. And centers always need help. So you can sign up for some little, can I do this or can I do that? And once we open up again, the center's open, eventually there might be some other things you can do to set up the altar and to greet guests when they come. Or if you're a financial person, maybe you can help with the books, or you can do this, or you're a fundraiser, or whatever, things like that. There's many, many ways to help. Bring refreshments, on and on. And it gives you this sense of worth, like I'm supporting, and it's not just their center, it's your center. And then you meet other people, and then that's what you talk about rather than talking about the latest gossip and politics and the latest football game and things like that. A little bit more virtue on the speech happening in the mind creates that familiarity. And then you can compare techniques where people say, I'm having trouble sitting, and somebody learned from someone else. Well, why don't you try this type of cushion? People said, I never thought about that. I just used the cushions that I saw at the center. So I went out and bought that kind of cushion. It doesn't really fit my body. Or I didn't know about that little altar table. That's kind of cool. And the little lamp that attaches, wonderful. So you get these little things that add a little zest, shortcuts to practice, or which prayers people like, which versions of which book. It's really nice to keep the practice invigorated like that. How can we bring, as this familiarity, how can we bring every action, no matter what, into our practice of Dharma? I mentioned that a bit earlier, of how to integrate that practice so that Dharma isn't just when I walk into the meditation hall. Dharma's not just when I'm sitting down at my altar. Then I'm going to be good and virtuous. I've seen people, we all know people with church, with synagogue, with temples, and I go in and suddenly now I'm in a holy space. Well, what about when you're with your neighbors? What about when you're at work? What about when you're in the grocery store? When you're at the movies, when the movies open up again, when you're driving? Is that not your Dharma practice as well? Right. Power number 4, the power of the antidote. The power of the antidote. When I mess up, which we will do because we're humans, okay, I will not beat myself up. Okay, I will pick myself up off the ground, dust myself off, and I will evaluate what the hell happened. Excuse my French. What happened? I will look at my mind and figure out what is my responsibility in this without blaming others. I'm going to look at, wow, okay, I was extremely tired. That's why I snapped at that guy. You know, I'm really afraid that I'm going to lose my job. So I've been really agitated, and that's why I cut that woman off. I can't really talk to her right now. So you understand, and then you know I need to make a little more space for myself. I need to take a break. I need to relax more. I need to get better sleep. Maybe do something kind for myself. Absolutely. Okay. But because I messed up, there's purification practices. Wonderful. We have many purification practices. They're very, very effective. One that most people are familiar with, we often do in the evening, Vajrasattva practice. Vajrasattva is simply an aspect of the Buddha that helps us purify. So what I'd like to do is protect myself from delusions by learning more about delusions and how they arise, learning how to transform them from our habitual self-cherishing attitudes, and cultivating more mindfulness, more awareness, vigilance when a delusion arises, so that I can counter it more quickly and not act from there, okay? Some introspection. And the vigilance is helpful to practice regular. So I've gotten to a point where, you know, there used to be anger, more anger. Now I catch it at annoyance, frustration, and irritation. And I'll notice the little bubbling up of that in my mind, this situation or this guy, and I'll just notice that. I kind of visualize now like bubbles, and bubbles are very light and they just float off, and often it's just gone. Never gets to full-blown anger. I mean, rare, I can't even think of like that. But I watch those little bubbles, but I'll note it, vigilant, watching my mind, and I'll have a moment in my mind where I'll think, there's irritation. But that's all. I'm not an irritated person. I'm not glomming myself together with the delusion, because that's not the nature of my mind. There's simply some annoyance in my mind right now, passing through. It's not the nature of my mind, okay? But I also use humor. So I might notice the irritation, and here's somebody in front of me that I'm kind of triggered it, but it's my mind. I'm taking responsibility, not blaming them. And I'll have a little voice now in the back of my mind that will say, Amy, do not open your mouth right now. Okay? Because something negative could come out. So a little humor, just take a deep breath. And I've trained over and over being vigilant. So now when it arises, it's a really small little blip. It goes on. I start thinking about the other person. What's their situation? Well, they may be struggling. I'm no better than them. Maybe they need help. Definitely going to calm down here. No point having a negative reaction. Okay? And as they say with the profound Lobsang teachings, Lobsang is mind training, Lobsang teachings, place all the blame on one. One of the famous Lobsang slogans from Master Atisha, place all the blame on one. What's the one? Beth, what's the one?
Self-cherishing. And one of my favorite parts, it's so great. Now you finally have somebody to blame for everything. It's such a shortcut.
Thank you. Thank you, Beth. Self-cherishing, that's it. There's nobody out there to blame. It's just my self-cherishing. But I'm also not laying a trip on myself. I'm not being bad to myself. I'm just acknowledging, oh, no wonder I'm not happy right now. I'm just thinking about myself, what I need. This person's interfering with my agenda. I'm more important. I need to get there faster. I need them to get out of the way. And just my self-cherishing. If I just relax a little bit and acknowledge it, maybe with humor, I'm okay. On I go. much more peaceful. It's just my self-cherishing. It's the cause of so much unhappiness. Power of the antidote is that one. Number 5, the power of prayer. Dedication, like that. So we've talked a bit about dedicating the merits, how important it is, and also prayer. And people, people are confused, like, how do I pray? Who do you pray to in Buddhism? Is like praying to Buddha, like praying to God? And I believe that Buddhas and Bodhisattvas that are Buddhist saints, I believe that they're out there through higher realization. We start to see them and can kind of interact with them. At our ordinary level, maybe not, right? But I like to have faith that they're out there, that they're kind of helping. So sometimes if you really need help, I think prayer is like a calling from the heart. You don't even need words. But if you want to say words, we have we have prayed in tears. We cry and we pray in humor. Usually when we really are desperate and need something, we pray for other people who have passed away and are suffering, like that. So I do think it's the Buddhists simply manifest externally as the highest level of a full manifestation of yourself, the highest manifestation of yourself. And they simply remind you, which is why they appear, or why there's statues, or why. So if I want to look at an image of the Buddha or one of my teachers, like His Holiness the Dalai Lama or Lama Zopa Rinpoche, and use that as inspiration, I can call on their help and say, please, can you help me now? I really need an answer to this. I need a sorting with this job. I need to shift this energy. I need some help with my health, whatever it is, and ask them. They are going to come to those who ask more, those that are kind of talking to them in a sense. So I really think that's the power of prayer. So again, considering motivation, positive action, familiarity, applying antidotes, and prayer and dedication as a way we can weave those through our practices. Any questions before we do some meditation, before we close? Mary Jo.
Please, could you just say a little bit more about dedication, please?
Sure. Dedication is like the other bookend around an activity after motivation. And what we're doing is investing the positive energy or merit into some higher quality of ourselves, especially to reach enlightenment. We often dedicate to. Why? So we can benefit all living beings. It's kind of sealed in that sense. How the process really works, I don't know. Like, why does it not then get destroyed by anger? I'm basing it on teachings from the Buddha, like that. So it's a sense of investing and sealing in the positive energy that you're creating.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Patty.
Real quick, when I have a feeling this is what we're going to do, the gross dissolution. And you say that it's, when you go through these visions, it's the entire experience. It's not separate from your mind. Okay. Am I feeling my body? I mean, it's when I've done this before, I see myself and these delusions, or these dissolutions, not delusions, dissolutions.
Right, or visualizations, right? Yes.
So just try and keep my physicality out of it.
Yeah, what I would say is often at an ordinary level, it's challenging to do the visions because you're not familiar with them. And the body's here kind of encumbered, so again, you're going to have yourself sitting here, but you try to visualize as best as you can. And some people have difficulty visualizing. I understand that. So again, you do the best you can. And initially you're just kind of imagining as if the vision is out there in front of you. But the thing is, when you really bring the winds in, they manifest automatically. So it just becomes your mind. It's what your mind is, but we don't have an experience of that. So we're just having to visualize out there. So good enough to just keep familiarizing the mind with that. That's okay. Okay, so let's try some of this meditation on the Sorry, I think I just muted. Okay. And you just try the best that you can. Excuse me. So what I'd like you to do is, first of all, just find a comfortable posture. And just bring your awareness to your breath, a normal, natural breath. You can lightly close your eyes. And when you do sit, whether you're sitting on a cushion or in a chair, the more you cannot lean heavily against the back of the chair or a wall, so you're supporting your back on its own, over time your back will become strong and the posture will be very natural. There's more of an obstruction every time we're leaning heavily against a seat or a back or something. Again, you have to do what works best for your body so that the body's comfortable. But I'd like you to imagine as if all of life, of this life, is done. You've done a good job. Everything is finished. All the business is finished. And you are packing up shop and getting on to the next rebirth that hopefully will be even better than this one. So letting go of the identity and all the people you love in this world, all the busyness, all the activities. Imagine them floating off into space. And just imagine your form element dissolving. The body may be feeling heavy, unable to lift, constrained under mounds of earth. It's a natural process. And imagine a mirage-like image appears to your consciousness. And it is your mind. This is all that there is this mirage, shimmering waves of water. Is your entire experience. And I will recognize this because I do not want to miss the clear light. Silvery blue mirage-like image, not separate from your mind. The earth element dissolves into the water element, and as the water element dissolves, the aggregate of feeling of the mind dissolves. So pain, pleasure, and neutral feelings are gone. The mouth and all the fluids may be drying up. Mouth is dry. Hearing weakens. The inner vision is a smoke-filled room, blue-gray smoke in a room, and that's all there is. Just focus your attention on that as best as you can. The fire element dissolves. The aggregate of discrimination of the mind dissolves. You no longer recognize people or remember the names of relatives and friends. Inhalation is very weak. Exhalation is longer. And the inner vision that arises is a spark-filled sky in the night sky, like fireflies. That's your entire experience, not separate from your mind. And think with the corner of your mind, I do not want to miss the clear light. The wind element is dissolving along with the aggregate of volition of the mind. Can no longer move your limbs. Senses of touch and taste cease. This is where the breathing stops. The last exhalation happens. The inner vision is a flickering glow around a candle about to go out. Focus your attention on that glow as best as you can. That's your whole experience. Now the more subtle consciousness dissolves, and there is a white appearance that manifests that is not separate from your mind. It is like a milky full moon over a harvest field. This is not separate from your mind. As the white substances come down from the crown, joining at the heart center, in the center of the heart chakra, creates that white vision. And just think, I will not miss the clear light. From here, there is a red appearance as the red substance comes up from the navel chakra up to the heart, joining with the white, like a magenta orange sunset. This is your whole experience, not separate from your mind. place your concentration on this as best as possible. There's a black near attainment that manifests like a dead faint as we get close to the clear light, nearly at the clear light, and imagine black as black can be. This is your mind. And the clear light dawns. This is your most subtle consciousness, like the clear sky at dawn. Magnificent, translucent luminosity. Just imagine as best as you can. And whatever notion you have of a concrete sense of yourself, I, as if it exists independently for all time, permanently, that doesn't exist at all. That sense of yourself does not exist at all. It's empty of that. It lacks that, absent of having that concrete, independent reality. So whatever merit we have created from our time together this afternoon, may we invest it in our progressing along this path to create deep imprints of positivity in our minds and in our hearts that will help us have peaceful, meaningful deaths. But before that, that we can have meaningful lives. And then we'll be able to traverse on to better and better rebirths that will help us get enlightened quickly so we can be of the most benefit to all living beings. Please relax. Slowly open your eyes. Are there any questions? And I know these meditations, if it's the first time you're doing it, it may be strange to you. It's just a matter of slowly learning, familiarizing.
What comes up immediately for me is the biggest concern I've got with dying, I would like to be calm. And I know when my breathing is cut off, I panic. I do a lot of breath work, a lot of pranayama. When my kumbhaka is too long, there's a feeling of panic starts to well up inside me. I hold it as long as I can because it's got certain values of doing that. But can you train yourself in this situation to where in this situation you can just accept it? You can just give yourself to it somehow, where the panic doesn't take over, because that's the opposite, obviously, of being calm.
Yeah, it's just slowly continuing to train so that the meditation normally calms you down, and you're so familiar with that you'll know
Okay.
that the natural thing is the breathing's going to stop.
Yeah.
The breathing is going to stop at some point, but again, that subtle consciousness will continue on. So it's not an issue of just gross breathing, because at some point that's going to cease. So the more we're familiar with that process and knowing that will happen,
Yeah.
and using meditation to just traverse you through those stages, that's kind of the familiarity with that we need.
Yeah.
So again, it's not going to, on our gross level, it doesn't really help because we're more, thinking about the actual breath, but that's not really happening when the death process is happening, especially in the subtle consciousness, those subtle visions. The breathing's already stopped and somehow the mind's still going. So you're okay there, as long as you are familiar with the better things you want to be familiar with. So I think just over time, familiarity with meditations and things, and you'll relax a little bit more. Hope that's helpful. And I'm just gonna.
Yeah, we'll see how it is.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. That's it's just it's my concern. I have panic, and I've related my panic to the lack of oxygen. Because of hyperventilating or whatever, you have a lack of oxygen. And,
But through the training in meditation, you're not hyperventilating if you're meditating properly. And the thing is, what you're doing is, this is more of a higher level practice. So at that point, you've been meditating a lot and you're pretty comfortable with your breathing and your meditation like that. So again, slowly, it comes with time. It comes with time.
Okay.
So just keep at it. Just keep at it.
Okay.
This is all for some of you, if you're beginner and things, slowly we slowly add on, and we just have to take ourselves step by step like that.
Okay.
So I'm going to stop there. It's been delightful to be with all of you today. I really appreciate Tupten Norbeling, Heather. Thank you so much for joining. I'm so grateful. And we are back tomorrow, and I hope you can join. And tomorrow we're going to talk about some more practical, we'll certainly wrap up the course, but we're going to go through more practical caregiving things of what we do in the West, how we take care of people, how we take care of ourselves, and all those practical things we're going to talk about like that. I also have, I know I've got a, I'll just put my, my website if it's helpful. Let's see where this is. Here we go. I lead pilgrimages, and the next one is supposed to be to Laudo, which is a remote retreat center in the Mount Everest region of Nepal. And it's a very special meditation place for me. That's a holy place for Rinpoche. And we did one in October 2018. So we're going to raise money for Laudo. I hope we'll be able to go next spring, 2022. The details are on the website. It was the old itinerary, but the itinerary is the same, just the dates will change. You can get an idea if you want to join. And there's also other courses. I'm starting a Meditation 101 course is going to be starting in June, and some other things that I'm also doing. Buddhism in a Nutshell that's going on now. You can jump in. So anyway, a few courses like that you can find. And I look forward to seeing all of you tomorrow. Thank you so much. I wish you a good rest of your day. Stay mindful.